So what I want to talk about is stance and meta-stance. So taking the stance and taking the stance about the stance, which is, of course, another kind of stance taking. And most of my work is about naturally occurring conversation and looking at face-to-face interaction, so it's rather different from what perhaps most of you are used to working with. But we all do conversation, and one of the things that I will try to end up with is a kind of a little micro-controversy that has erupted on the web recently, where a certain photograph won the World Press Association Photograph of the Year, and people on a photography website wrote in comments like all kinds of comments about this picture, and then other people wrote in comments about the commenters. So I'm hoping to bring it to a domain that is more familiar to you and perhaps more directly of interest. But I will start out with my home territory, which is naturally occurring conversation. Okay, so one thing that obviously is an issue in the question of reputation is who's speaking, and that's what this website is about. I was interested in this prose that I listed from the website, which is a reputation model as a way for a user community to collectively regulate and calibrate the contributions of its members. To me, this sentence contains a lot of entry points for me to come in and say, okay, I can recognize this. Regulating and calibrating to me would involve aspects of what I'm calling stance, which would include evaluation of position of the self, positioning your identity, and aligning with other participants. So I see a lot of connections here that can be made, even though the language that I'm using may be somewhat different. So I've seen a connection between reputation evaluation and stance taking. And basically a lot of the issues that I've seen being raised in the materials for this workshop seem to resonate with things that I've been trying to think about. So evaluation is one key aspect of the act of taking a stance. There's more to it than that, and so I define stance as a triplex act, 3 acts in one. Perform any one of these, and basically you're implicated with the other 2. So if you evaluate, stance involves evaluation, positioning, and alignment. And the kind of short version of this is I evaluate something and thereby position myself and thereby align with you. So this is kind of the blowback effect. If I align something positively, negatively, harshly, cruelly, jokingly, I'm not just putting something out there about that object, I'm also telling the world about myself. And people in conversation tune into this with a laser focus, so people are very careful about, very tuned into aspects of stance and so on. Okay, now one thing that comes up that's very closely linked to this is the idea of resonance. So I define resonance as the activation of affinities across utterances. So if you say something, I say something, if there's some kind of affinity of whatever kind, then you can think of that as a resonance. So Joanne and Ken are a couple. They've been having a conversation. Joanne has said something about her mother, which is not entirely complimentary. She turns to her husband and says, "It's kind of like you, Ken." 8/10 of a second pause, which is a very long conversation. Ken says, "That's not at all like me, Joanne." Okay, so this is a very ordinary kind of thing. Two people taking stances, as it happens about another person. And if we kind of line things up here, what we see is that we got some exact matches in words, but we also have some things that are not exactly matches, but they're resonating in the sense that I'm talking about. So this is one thing that is part of the background of stance taking in conversation. One person says something and another person reuses a lot of the same words and the same structures, kind of sends it back. But notice that it doesn't have to be all warm and fuzzy. It's just the fact that you're reusing someone's words doesn't mean you're agreeing with them. It could be kind of in-your-face contradiction. Okay, so what can be evaluated? So the object of evaluation can be a thing, a person, an event, a situation, a relation, idea, statement, utterance, or expression. Basically, anything that can be thought about or spoken of can be evaluated. And so that basically tells us that the object of evaluation, the target, as Dan was calling it a moment ago, or maybe on those slides from the first day, the target can be anything, including the act of taking a stance. Oops. Okay. Okay, so let me just give you another example here. So we have, this is Jennifer and Dan, another couple. This is some of my richest data. They're playing a computer game. And, okay, so Jennifer says, look at you being smart. I'm not smart. You're stupid. Don't call me stupid. And a kiss. And, okay. So what do we have here? We've got these things here. All of this is classic examples of resonance. Look at you being smart. Notice that if we take this literally, Jennifer's saying that Dan is smart. What does he do? He laughs. Says I'm not smart, which just the words I'm not smart could be a negative comment about yourself, but the question mark again indicates a rise in intonation, which basically throws the ball back at her. So again, if we look at these elements, we see a lot of alignment going on in the utterance. Now these people aren't stopping to say we're going to now do some meta stance here, but they're doing it. It's just something that unfolds naturally in conversation. And a lot of it is signaled in ways that are not very overt, like I hereby am commenting on your stance, but you just reuse the same elements. And by the fact that you're tweaking things in a certain way, bringing out what I call the stance differential. The stance differential is the difference between my stance and your stance. And people are very subtle in their ability to calibrate very precise details of the stance differential. Okay, again, these might seem like sharply differentiated stances, similar to the first one, but okay, we're going to see some more subtle things. So the object of evaluation is open-ended. Anything that can be thought of or spoken of, as I indicated on the earlier slide, must include evaluation itself. So by virtue of the reflexivity of language, the object of evaluation may be an evaluation, an evaluator, the person who's doing the evaluation, or generally stance and the stance taker. So these are open to evaluation, and I think that you can immediately see how that gets into issues of reputation. Okay, so here we're in a conversation, Miles and Jamie and Harold and Pete, talking about, I really was wondering what that guy was thinking. He's talking about, this is a conversation that took place in the city, in San Francisco, and Miles has just told a story about a dance club that he goes to, at which a man and a woman did something on the dance floor that caused everyone to stop and watch and clap at the end. So I won't go into the details, but anyway, it's quite stimulating to Miles. So he says, I really was wondering what that guy was thinking. He must have been, since he didn't know her, that must have been quite a shock. That was really weird. That sounds really weird. Okay, I won't go through this whole thing, but just to pick out these things. So we're talking about imagining what someone else was thinking during an experience. Talking about he didn't know this woman who came up to him on the dance floor. Must have been quite a shock. Now Jamie comes in and says, Jamie is a woman, that was really weird, which sounds like, okay, shock and weird, that's pretty much along the same lines. So she seems to be saying almost the same thing. But then she does this, that sounds really weird. What I would say is that she's kind of pulling back. So to say that was really weird suggests that she has epistemic access to this event. Well, she only knows about it because Miles just told the story. Miles was there, he saw it, he just told the story. She knows about it from him, from exactly 30 seconds ago. So she comes in and actually corrects herself. That was really weird, that sounds really weird. It's almost the same thing, but it's a world of difference in terms of saying, you're the stance leader, I'm the stance follower. And so this is one thing that I would point out that has come out of my research is that there's a very sharp difference that people tune into in very fine calibration between a stance lead and a stance follow. But this can be obliterated by kind of what I think of as the ballot box approach to stance, which is check here. It doesn't matter who votes earlier in the day or later in the day. We throw all those ballots together and we treat them as equivalent. But in a conversation, it does matter who said something first. Even if both people have the same access, people notice who said it first. If you don't acknowledge that, then you may actually be seen as a problematic participant. So I'm going to kind of zip through the rest of this stuff. There's what do you think? I think you think. You better go back. Okay. So you can see that people are embedding. This is recursive stance here. Thinking about thinking and talking about talking. Okay. Now, I just was trying to make a point that people are very tuned into who's the stance leader and who's the stance follower. So here we have Ken saying, I would love to go. They're talking about going to Nicaragua for perhaps a big vacation. And this is a group of people that, for whom the political implications of going to Nicaragua are of interest. So anyway, I would love to go. Whoops. Let's go back here. So I would love to go. Yeah. Yeah? I want to go too. So Jan is using this word too, which got kind of knocked off the edge there. But the key thing to notice here is that there's a lot of alignment between the two stances. But Joanne is acknowledging that she's doing a stance follow. She's following the previous stance. So if you take out the two, these things can get very strange. Here's another example. Either works the same way. So I don't like those, I don't either. If Angela had said, I don't, then that's kind of a funny thing. So what it turns out is, if you want, as a linguist, which is what I am in my normal life, as a linguist, we like to figure out how people use words like to and either. And one of the things that people do most often with to and either is basically calibrate the relationship between my stance and your stance. So acknowledging that you're doing the stance lead, I'm doing the stance follow. Okay. Now, laughter can be an evaluation. I'm not sure how we can, well, okay, notice that on the web people have felt the need to recreate this with LOL and all the variations on that. So here, Harold has just explained that he gets free dance classes because his wife Jamie is a dance instructor. Miles says, oh really? That's why you married her. So laughter from Miles especially. Jamie comes in, says some benefit, but there's the @ sign indicates pulses of laughter. So there's other details here that we don't need to worry about. So she's laughing in the middle of her ironic acknowledgement here, and then more laughter from Jamie, Miles, and so on. But what happens in the next thing? Harold says, better than nothing. Silence, half a second. Miles laughs, Pete laughs. Jamie doesn't laugh, he says, oh, I cannot believe you said that. What a jerk you are. So what we have here is, first of all, some emotion, very loud. I cannot believe you said that. So she's evaluating his stance up here, and then drawing conclusions about him as a person. And of course, there's some irony here that's not to be taken literally entirely. Now, how can we put this into a model? I think you've already seen a sketch of the stance triangle. But let me try to show you my new and improved version here. So the subject evaluates an object, and so this is the shared stance object is this thing in red here. And what's interesting, the triangles are everywhere in theories, but what's different about this triangle is I'm using up 2 of the 3 slots for the same thing, 2 subjects. So the second subject comes in and does the same thing as the first, evaluates the object. But this shared stance object turns out to be critical in kind of, it's the glue that holds this together and puts subject 1 and subject 2 into a relationship with each other. So in evaluating something else, they're positioning themselves. So this is a reflexive arrow that kind of bends back on yourself. And through this whole process, they're creating an alignment together. So all of that then comes together. Okay, so maybe we'll skip this example. Well, no, I won't because I got. So Angela says, I gave him $10, but that's all I had. Well, that was enough. I guess that was enough. So let's go to the next example. So Doris, that was enough. Angela says, that was enough. And then we have things like I guess and I guess and well, which are, it takes some time to show that, but they're basically largely about the alignment between two people. So epistemic access and so on. Now we can relate this to intersubjectivity. And this is kind of the same picture here. So we have a subjective relationship. And I'm calling all of this subjectivity. I think it's very common for people to think of subjectivity as kind of an escape into the interior where anything goes, it's whatever you happen to think. I'm more interested in subjectivity as something that people put on the line. They expose their subjectivity. Once you have an engagement between a subject and an object and you express that verbally, you're kind of out there, and your subjectivity is out there. So that whole package then is the subjectivity. Then we have, of course, the second subjectivity there. And we have the issue of intersubjectivity, which the word makes you think this is a relationship between two subjects. And what I'm trying to suggest is a different way of thinking about it. It's not a relationship between two subjects. Instead, it's a relationship between two subjectivities. Okay? So what happens in conversation is people put their stance on the line. Whenever you take a stance, you're taking some kind of relationship between yourself and the subject, and yourself as subject, and some object of the stance that you're evaluating. You're articulating that subjectivity, making it public. Other people put their subjectivity on the line, and intersubjectivity then becomes something that you can actually study overtly. How is intersubjectivity constructed in real acts by real people? So that's, for me, I want to take something like intersubjectivity and move it out of the philosophical column and move it into the empirical domain that I can start to study and think about how people do this. So that whole configuration then would be the domain of intersubjectivity. Now, just for convenience of making the arrows look pretty on the screen, I tend to move the arrow back to its home there on the side. But that shouldn't deceive us as to what's really going on. Okay, now instead of conclusions, I thought I'd try to get to this thing I mentioned earlier about the kind of open this up. To let's see, just do better here if I'm looking at the screen. So this is the famous photo that caused this controversy. It's the World Press Association photo of the year, taken by a photographer from the New York Times, Samuel Arenda. And this showed up, as I say, on this website. It's called VP Review. It looks into camera stuff, and that's kind of where people, one of the places people go to look for reviews of cameras and so on. And it's not their primary thing to talk about photography, and so a lot of people are talking about, megapixels and this and that. So this thing triggered quite a few comments by the standards of this site. I think 175, which may not be that many for other sites, but for this one, it's fairly quite a few. And we could look at some of the comments, but what I wanted to, let's see, people were saying things like, I wonder why this thing won the award. It's a terrible picture, or it's too negative, or it's a ninja who's just snapped the neck of a guy. Well, it turns out that this guy is, this is taken in Yemen, and this is after some of the demonstrations against the president or whatever it is. And this woman knew her son was in the demonstration, couldn't find him anywhere, no one knew where he was, so she goes to the places, she goes to the morgue, she goes to all the tents where dead bodies are, she goes to the field hospitals that have been set up and can't find her son anywhere, finally finds him. He's having difficulty breathing, but he's alive, and this is what we're seeing here. So there's a tension between maybe the plastic gloves on her hands while she's just been in the morgue. People are interpreting all kinds of things, like, oh, in Islamic culture, of course you can't touch a man, you have to wear rubber gloves. So people have all kinds of knowledge here that they're willing to share with everyone. And other people are talking about lack of focus, and other people are saying it's fake because it's got a backdrop set up. And other people are saying it can't be fake because the lighting sucks, and okay, all kinds of stuff like that. Now, the top, in terms of the comments that got responses from people, I think of the top 5, 4 of them are negative evaluations of the other evaluators on the site. So just to go down to one of those, so oh, I don't have it sorted by popularity. So this is just to give the sequence. So go by popularity. So the top 2, one is saying that photographs are too negative. But let me just go to this one here because I think we can see some of the discourse. So this is 18, which is tied for first place in terms of the number of likes. So, okay, I really wonder if those leaving the most immature and retarded comments would have posted if they had bothered to take a look at the series this photograph is part of. Fascinating to see such lack of humanitarian value and respect expressed by a large number of pixel peepers here on DP Review. A sad day for photography for sure. So kind of a blistering comment on the other commenters. Rusticus comes in and says, do not go overboard, Mike. But the other comments in response to this are all agreeing, basically saying, yeah, it's really embarrassing, the quality of the comments on this website here. I agree with Mike, a lot of, okay, notice agree, it's perfect alignment verb. A lot of these comments have made me cringe. This is obviously not the place to talk about photography. So basically the person is evaluating the whole website. Like, if you want to talk about photography, don't go to DP Review, which is all about photography. I appreciate that DPR is starting to include news events that go beyond the technical, but this level of response is just embarrassing. So morons are everywhere. Okay. So I'm sure you've all seen this kind of controversy erupt. What's of interest to me is the dynamic here. I mean, I haven't yet done this, but I could take these comments and bring them into the kind of diagraph analysis that I do with my conversational material. It seems clear that this would respond quite well. I mean, it's not real-time, face-to-face conversation. Maybe some of these people don't know each other, but maybe some of them do. This do not go overboard Mike. Maybe Mike is well known on this website. I don't know. So I guess what my final conclusion would be simply that all the issues that you all are deeply immersed in terms of trying to sort of calibrate value as it emerges through interactions of many people on the web, I see a huge connection to the stuff that I'm looking at in conversation. It's the same human beings. It's the same sense that we're embedded in a world of value. And basically, whenever anyone is invoking values, they're basically implicating the whole value system. And people get really sensitive to, it's not just that photograph you're evaluating, it's what you're doing to the whole system of values that we all gotta live with. So we're all in this, like, don't spit in the soup, we all gotta eat kind of thing.